Welcome to Speak Out, Stand Out by Green Communications, where we're learning how to help our kids become better communicators. We believe our voices are the strongest asset we have, and our mission is to empower the next generation to use their voices to make a difference in the world around them. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or are just invested in today's youth, we hope this podcast will help you build confidence in our future, one voice at a time.
Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Maisie Ruttan. Maisie is a family sleep specialist and parenting coach. She helps parents navigate those dreadful sleepless nights and challenging bedtimes using a combination of sleep science and parenting strategies. So I'm super excited to hear the answers that I wish I would have had many years ago when mine were littles. But unlike most sleep coaches, Maisie specializes in working with the kids beyond like ages 2 and beyond the baby years. So she's very experienced in this as well because she has twins herself. So understands the family dynamic of bedtime routines and sometimes the challenges it poses. So Maisie, thanks so much for being here. We're really excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
So very quickly, I gave you, a rough background of what you do, but how did you find that this was your calling? This is the thing that speaks to you in the way that you can help families. What happened to lead you there?
Yeah, I have no idea. If you would have, said, Maisie, you're going to be a sleep coach, I would have been like, huh, what's a sleep coach? Right. But, it all started when I was pregnant because I have twins and I was on, an early kind of bed rest because there were some complications, but I was restless. And so, going out to the mall and things, and I was huge. And so everybody was always like, oh my goodness, you're never going to sleep again. Like, I was like, people are so unkind. Like, I'd go home and cry. Like, I was so scared because like people were like, oh, I used to want twins until I had kids and now there's no way. Or my cousin's auntie's sister, so-and-so has twins. And, it's really hard. I'm like, yeah, I mean, people said nice things too, but I got scared. So I just read a lot about sleep, parenting, pregnancy, birth, all the things. And then, my twins, they slept okay, not amazing, but they slept like babies and pretty good. And it wasn't really until I wanted to go back to work that I realized I didn't want to go back to work. I'm a nurse, or I was a nurse, and was kind of just throwing around ideas, and a friend suggested it. And so I kind of became a sleep coach, and that kind of just, that's where the obsession started, was just like, oh, this is really interesting. It fit really closely with what I did before. I used to work really closely with adults and youth with disabilities and mental health challenges, and none of them slept well. So it was very hand in hand. And, I was like, yeah, this is good. And then my kids got older and everything got harder. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. Like, this is hard. And that's where my parenting certification came in. And that's really where I decided to specialize in kids, because there are so many families with, 4, 5, 8, 10-year-olds that have these sleep challenges and nobody talks about them. Everybody's just like, oh yeah, baby years is hard. Then you got like kind of the no phase in the toddler years. But the impression is that sleep is easy after that. And for a lot of people, it's not. And so that's how I got here in a roundabout way over the last 5-6 years.
But it's so true. I feel like when people talk about having an infant, they're like, you're not going to be able to sleep, or sleep when the baby sleeps, or whatever. And infants, if there aren't any complications, sleep pretty darn good. I mean, they're awake several hours, or consistently, but they can be kind of solid sleepers. And it's interesting that is the point, like you said, that everybody focuses on whenever the challenges in my family definitely arose when we got a little bit older. And so I'm excited to talk with you about this. It is, I feel like there's varying advice, and it's like one extreme or the other of how we deal with sleep issues with our kids. And I look back at the way some of the things that we tried with my oldest when we were going through this, and regret so much some of the things that we tried. So I am really excited to have you, and I'm sure this is going to be helpful for many people listening. So let's just start with, what is your number one like go-to phrase, strategy, or whatever, when somebody says, my kid won't go to bed. They just won't go to bed and go to sleep. And I know this is like, that's a very broad question with many answers, but like, how do you start this? How do you start evaluating what is the issue and how can we help support them?
Oh, that's a tricky one. It is a loaded question because there's like a million different reasons why a kid might not go to sleep. But, the first thing that I would be really wanting them to recognize is that sleep is a biological process, like it will happen eventually, right? It's like breathing, your heart rates. There will become a point where your child physically cannot stay awake any longer. So when you say won't sleep or can't sleep, the physical piece, there's so much is there, but there's this whole mental piece and the whole relationship piece and the confidence piece is where it really, really gets tricky, I find. And so I would say, what I would want to know why. What is their instinct as to why? Often families have an idea. Oh, I think it's because this. Sometimes not, but that would be my first thing, is to look at if we could figure out the why. Why are they having troubles with sleeping?
And what do you find is the most kind of common thread for that, of what we might be thinking? Maybe this is the why in our house.
Yeah, I would say the most common reason is relationship or connection based, where we are just not super bonded with our kids that day, not super connected. We've been busy working or busy doing, cooking and, running back and forth to like after school activities or whatever the thing is, where we haven't spent enough time, like actually face to face in a conversation with our child. And that impacts sleep in so many different ways because they need us for offloading all of their emotions from the day, for problem solving anything that happened, and even just to feel kind of just regulated and calm. They rely so much on us and the routines. And so that's the biggest thing that I would say, particularly in toddlers and preschoolers, but don't write it off if you have an older child. Like this can absolutely be a thing where, they're delaying with things like, oh, I'm not tired. I want another story. Can I stay up a little bit longer and watch TV? Can I this, or I need some water. Can you come tuck me in again? All of these different things is often related to this connection where they're seeking you because their love tank is empty, essentially. Not that they're consciously thinking, I don't feel loved today. Like that's not what I'm saying. But, we are like a community species. We're meant to be surrounded by each other. And sometimes we don't get enough of that in a day.
I think that that makes perfect sense. That's the first time I've ever heard that or considered that thought. But I feel like I have trouble going to sleep if I am, maybe irritated at my husband for something, or a coworker or something like that. It bothers my sleep. Why wouldn't it impact our kids too?
Yeah.
So I think it makes perfect sense, but that's brand new information to me.
Oh, yeah. It's something that people don't think about. People will talk about it in different ways. They'll say that your child is attention seeking, that they need stronger boundaries, that they are just, they're trying to push the boundaries to be able to stay up later and to, have more control and things like that. And that is I would say the predominant viewpoint in society, in our modern society, that is what's happening. I argue that yes, they're attention seeking, if you want to call it that, but it's not manipulative or of malintent. It's that there's a reason that they are not relaxing into sleep and that they're holding on to the day and holding on to you for some sort of reason that they need solved. And it's not just to be a pain in the ass, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Right? It's so easy to want to just feel it as being intentional, especially when you're tired at the end of the day and you're like, just go to sleep. I'm tired. Just go to sleep. It's hard to see through the underlying root of what it could be and see your child through those empathetic eyes when you're frustrated.
Right. And tired too, right? We go to bed as well.
Yeah.
So what do you say then? Like, how do we handle this? We're in that moment, and like you just said, we just want them to go to sleep. We have like a kitchen to clean before we can go to bed or whatever, lunches to pack. And it's not always easy to be super patient in those moments, but it's so important that we are. What are your tips and strategies that you say this is the way to best handle and communicate with your child about this situation?
Okay, so even though you want them to do bedtime, you want them to go to bed, you don't they're getting older, you want them to be doing things more independently. Don't be afraid to backtrack and do things together. And there's this obsession with independence, like you can get dressed and brush your teeth by yourself, go get dressed and brush your teeth by yourself. You can read yourself, you can read now, go read yourself a story, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Bring yourself into the bedtime routine. Our kids learn to be confident. They learn healthy associations with sleep by having repeated interactions with us doing that. And so if your child is, expressing fears, not wanting you to leave after the tuck in, all of these different things, they need that confidence built up, and they build that through us. And so I would say to, even if they can do things themselves, don't be afraid to bring yourself back in and treat them like your little baby again. And yeah, it really can help blossom the independence. Like independence comes from supported dependence. And that's what I think a lot of families go wrong with when it comes to bedtime. They just like push kids to do it themselves. All right, good night, bye. And it's just too much. We support them with so many other things more than we do with sleep. We kind of fast track the sleep development, I find. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so if you're talking about the process of going to bed, is it I'm assuming it's good to have a routine, right? So they know exactly what to expect each night and talk them through that routine.
Yeah, I mean, that depends on the age of the child. I think, routines are helpful. We don't want them to be so rigid that it's just boring. And if it's too rigid and it's not working, then you're just like repeating dread every night, right? Like the definition of sanity is doing the same thing over and over, right? And expecting a different result. So routines are good when they're working. If they're not working, don't be afraid to kind of change things up a little bit. But yeah, I think that ultimately there's no right or wrong with the bedtime routine. People obsess over the bedtime routine. Oh, I'm gotta do my books. I gotta do my stories. It's 8:00. You better be doing this, right? That's important. Our kids need to brush their teeth. They need to go pee before going to bed. Like things like this, they have to happen. But the biggest thing is that connection that I mentioned, and allowing kids to offload during the day. And so, giving them a chance, especially with like bedtime stories, for example, even if they can read themselves, doesn't mean you have to read them a book. But, come in and during that time when their guard has been let down, when they're relaxed, and allow them to talk to you. That you'd be surprised. That is the number one time when kids will open up to you is at bedtime. And if that's a time when you emotionally can't handle it, because a lot of parents just can't, they're too tired to like, oh God, not now. And then the kid, they feel like we're closed off. Then build that into your routine earlier on in the evening or after school or something like that. But your child needs to offload with you before bedtime, or at least it helps if they can. So yeah, that's what I would say is like the must to include in the bedtime routine is some sort of element of connection. Maybe you give them a massage and you chat during that. Maybe you tell them something from your childhood that you remember that reflected on something that was today. It's the conversational piece, right? It's really is huge, the bonding that you have together when you're talking and snuggling or reading stories or whatever you're doing. It boosts oxytocin, which enhances your connection. It lets your guard down, it lets their guard down, helps them fall into sleep easier. And there's so much research on the importance of stories at bedtime, particularly with younger kids in helping with like language development and helping with routines and all of these things into the later years.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting too what you just said about that it's the kids are most likely to open up to you at that point. I'd never had heard that as a fact, but it is definitely in my house, and I see that with my 14-year-old. He still likes for me to scratch his back at night, and that's when he'll tell me things about the day or things that are bothering him or whatever. And it sometimes it can be like, I'm really tired. I'm
Yeah.
not ready to have a conversation like this with you. But then trying to reset, and be like, this is so important that he is having this conversation with me, even though it's not the ideal time for me. It's the ideal time for him. So we want to make them obviously feel loved and connected, and not just that it's a rigid, brush your teeth, read one story, kiss you goodnight. That's it, right? That it's a time for them to feel safe, to feel loved, and all of that. What do you say about the kiddos that wake up in the middle of the night and come in and say, Mom, I can't sleep. I'm going to get in bed with you. Mom, will you come scratch my back or whatever? When we are probably at our lowest point of being able to handle it and communicate in a empathetic way. What do we do with those situations? Because this is normal. Everybody deals with it, right? Everybody has a kid that will do this at some point. So
Yeah.
how do we handle it?
It is normal for kids to continue waking up, once a night, a couple times a week, ongoing. Really, eventually it slowly decreases, over time. And, instead of happening every day, it's, a couple times a week kind of thing, or a couple times a month. But yeah, absolutely. It's super normal. And I would say it's really dependent on, again, the why. I know that's kind of like, it feels like a cop-out answer, but it does. If your child is scared or anxious, your response is going to be different than if they can't sleep. If they're having trouble sleeping, then we're going to want to look at, things like their circadian rhythm and their sleep schedule and what time they're waking up. Whereas if they're scared, then we're going to be looking into like helping them feel grounded and calm, right? So there's so many different things. I would say that the number one thing for this, I'm gonna take that back. That stuff's good, but the number one is screens. The screens. Yes, I'm gonna say no screens before bed, and I'm sure anybody listening to this is like, yeah. We know this, and it's hard to. We're a screen era. It's hard to turn the phone off, the games off, the computer off, the TV, all of these different things. We know this, but what a lot of people don't know is why. And so we know it impacts melatonin. Most people realize this, but the downfall of this is that it can lead to night wakes. So what happens is your kids are tired. They've been awake all day. They've had a busy day at daycare or school or whatever, playing whatever they're doing. So they fall asleep because they are tired. But if they've watched TV or screens right up till bedtime, there's going to be a delay in their melatonin. So that melatonin doesn't get released until it has some dimness, right? If we're thinking evolutionary days, like the sun's gone down, it's signaling melatonin, right? So that delays it from being released for a couple of hours. So what happens then is that there's less in your system. So once your initial tiredness wears off from being, just super tired from the day, it's like you've had a nap kind of thing. You can wake up because your pressure to go to sleep is gone, and you might not have enough melatonin in your body. So it can lead to night wakes. It can also lead to restless sleep, not as good quality of sleep, and so it can really just impact the quality of your sleep. And so I just wanted to mention that because so many families will say, well, my kid falls asleep just fine. I don't need to worry about the screen. They're quiet. They're out of my hair. A lot of kids fall asleep to the TV, and that is one of the things that has been shown in the research to be one of the worst things that you can do for sleep. And I say that like apprehensively because I know a lot of families have TVs in their kids' room. It's nice for them to have some space out of your hair. But yeah, watching TV at bedtime or while you're sleeping has been associated with, insomnia and, other not so great factors into adulthood and that. So something worth thinking about, setting that boundary if you currently are doing that with your child.
Yeah. And you're right. I'm the same as you. I've thought, well, they go to sleep just fine.
Yeah.
Not thinking about how that would impact them hours later, right? That's not kind of on the radar. So thank you for explaining the reasons why behind that. That is so important for us to remember.
Yeah.
Well, how do we know when it's just, our child is just growing and they're not always going to have a good night's sleep. Some nights are going to be better than others. Or when it's maybe something more that we really should, bring somebody in, like an expert like you, to talk about what is going on and how can we make this, better for them, because we know how important sleep is for them and for us. Obviously, we have to have it. We, can't live without it. So
Yeah.
when do we think this is beyond just the norm? Maybe we need some assistance.
I would say follow your gut. Really, anytime you're worried or feeling stressed is worth reaching out. I mean, because ultimately your kids it could be normal, but if you're not coping, then something's wrong, right? That what is worth improving, right? And so everybody's lives and situations are so different. Some people can handle a child waking up overnight because they fall asleep instantly and it doesn't really matter. Other, parents, they get woken up and they're awake for 2 hours and, the child falls asleep quick again, but parent hasn't. So then that's a problem, right? So I would say if it's taking your child a long time to fall asleep, so if it's taking them, more than, 20 minutes or half an hour to fall asleep at bedtime, if the bedtime routine is taking more than like a half an hour, an hour, and if they're waking up, pretty regularly, one or more times a night after the age of, say, 5, then I would say there's most likely something that can be done to improve things. Even if things are normal, I find there's always room to make things smoother.
Yeah. So what would be one of my last questions for you is what do you suggest that how do we communicate this with kids? Because they only have, they don't understand necessarily why sleep is so important. And I think about like, the age old thing of when you can't go to sleep counting sheep, which has never worked for me. Do you have any like strategies though, or things like that we could, explain to our children that might help them relax and calm down and actually be able to sleep and whenever they're struggling?
Yeah, it's hard. And the younger the child, the harder it is to rationalize and teach them. And then also
Yeah.
the older the child, the harder it is to rationalize and teach them. So you have that like magic sweet spot around like age 6 or 7 where they might listen to you. But the biggest way is by modeling and living and practicing what you're teaching. Don't stay up late and watch TV after your kids go to bed because that's a little bit hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
Things like this. So modeling and having strong boundaries. Maybe everybody in the family puts their phone into a basket overnight, or maybe the router and the modem get turned off at night. You can get little timers for them and have it turn off so there's can't do Netflix without the internet, right? So yeah, it's hard. You can tell them that they're going to be cranky the next day, but other than letting them have that lived experience, which they probably won't really care or connect the dots, there's not a whole lot that you can do. You can create self-awareness by thinking, oh, you're so tired, look at you're sleepy, look at you got droopy eyes, you're yawning, and try and help them connect the dots between how their body feels. But yeah, that's $1 million question. It really is.
Because we still haven't found out what works for adults either, right? It can't like us me counting shit.
Exactly. Like what adult doesn't fight their sleepy signs because they're watching something good on TV or reading the last few pages in a book, or because they just need some downtime after the kids went to bed, right? Like, again, that's that modeling piece, right? If we don't listen to our own bodies and respect the need for sleep, how can we expect our kids to? So that modeling piece really is important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Well, Maisie, this was really informational and very helpful. Do you have any last tips or strategies or anything that you want to share? And then, of course, people can contact you, they can work with you directly, but anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to drop in?
My last tip is to just recognize how much your child how much sleep your child needs. Because that's another thing that I would say that most families that I see have wrong, is that they're expecting their child to need more sleep than they actually are. And so if they're needing less sleep than you're expecting, what's going to happen is they're going to wake up early, they're going to have a hard time falling asleep, or they're going to wake up in the middle of the night, right? Like ultimately we can't make their bodies sleep if their bodies are going to sleep. There's a big range of what's normal in terms of the hours of sleep, depending on the age. And you can look that up on Google. But that doesn't mean that your child is going to necessarily sleep the exact same every night. There's an average that fluctuates. It depends on how busy you are. If you've had a lazy day, they're probably going to sleep a bit less than if they had a really busy day. And so really just getting an idea of what that is, and then timing it from what time they need to go to school in the morning, or what time you need to get out of the house, and then count backwards. Because there's so many families, they put their kids to bed too early because society tells us kids need to be in bed at 7 or 8. And, then they can't fall asleep. And so they're not tired. So that's my last tip, I would say. Mm-hmm.
So we're creating a battle that maybe wouldn't have been there otherwise.
They're tired. Yeah. We want them to go to bed, and because good parents have their kids to bed early, and all of those lovely beliefs that are out there. Yeah.
And it's so situational, right? It is so situational. So.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Some kids need their early bedtimes. Like this is what I mean. Like it's very individual, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Maisie, this was great. And so you do offer individualized coaching and things like that, right? And we'll make sure we link to everything in the show notes. But if you want to just tell us quickly too, a little bit about if somebody's saying, I need more help with this.
Yeah.
What does that look like with you?
Yeah, I do individual coaching with families. Even if you just have like a quick burning question, we can, book an hour and can help you out, or we can work together longer and solve some bigger challenges. And then I have a group program as well that I run that's for families between the ages of 6 and 8 generally. And that is really focusing on bedtime battles and supporting and nurturing independent sleep for kids that just can't hold on, and bedtime's stressful, and generally they're crawling into parents' beds and waking up overnight, and it's usually a big hodgepodge of all the things that can going wrong. But sometimes it's just that bedtime's stressful. So that's me. That's primarily what I do. And I hang out on Instagram a lot. And so if you have any questions, you can DM me on Instagram. I've got lots of little freebie videos on Instagram that you can check out that give you some more quick tips, kind of similar to what we've talked about today. I'm really big on just normalizing and helping families understand the real things about sleep that are important, rather than just what kind of just gets regurgitated over and over and over in blogs and on Google, because it's not helpful. What you see on Google is not helpful. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So again, we'll link to everything. So if you're listening, you can click on the show notes to be able to connect with Maisie in one of those ways. Again, appreciate your time and your insight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you are looking for more ways to build communication skills in your kids, grab our free mini lesson on how to craft a polished and professional speech out of thin air, along with 52 fun prompts so your kids can practice every single week. You can find that along with info about our upcoming public speaking and debate courses for kids at greencommunicationsedu.com.